It's time for a Egyptian love affair. It's also time to get uncanny.
This Uncanny Earth is dedicated to the memory of Todd David Anderson.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 189. Ever so close to that 200 beautiful episode that will be premiering sometime in July, I believe, if we...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we calculated it, didn't we? We tried to go, because we thought it was going to be sooner than it was.
Yes, we did. I thought it was going to be next month, but I guess not. So, I don't know. Anyways, guys, thank you for joining us. We are just hanging out. Remember, head on over to our YouTube channel, and please, for all that is good, tell your family and friends, tell people you don't even like about our show, so then they'll like our show. And then you two can build a sweet friendship off of our show. See what we do here? We connect people. That's what we do on this show. We connect people. Whether the good or the bad, you take that and then that's the facts of life, you know? I don't know what we're doing. Anyways, as always, I am your host, the illustrious one himself, Robert Solomon. I said that last week, too. I'm a very illustrious person.
You're trying to get it to stick.
It's going to stick. Pancakes to a horrible pan. Listen, with me is the disgruntled one. That's going to stick because that's actually true. You're very disgruntled. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Spider.
It is me. I'm here. I'm hanging out.
It's you.
And I changed it up a little bit since we're considering the topic. It's almost like we're debating like old explorers, like Victorian explorers, and so I have wine today.
Wait, are you really drinking wine? Like, seriously?
Yeah, but you know what? It was still aged in bourbon barrels. So, there's the link.
It never fails with you.
There's the link.
That's good, though. How is it?
It's not bad. It's understated. It's not... It's like a red blend, and it's not too sweet, it's not too sour, it's not crazy. Like, I don't do super sweet stuff anymore. I used to be a bigger wine drinker several years ago before I hit the hard stuff. And... then my voice changed like that, and but this isn't that bad. This is nice and mild. This is the kind of thing you'd sit and have like a cheese tray with, and you'd talk about ancient civilizations.
So first off, in our comments, we have T Queen Ross. She says, "First time I've heard you live. Hello." Now she's somebody that follows me on my streams, and she actually just hit 100 followers. She did a crazy 12-hour stream the other day, and it was pretty wild. Everybody came through, and so that's really awesome. It's good to community that we're all part of, like everybody.
Networking.
Yeah, everybody has shown each other love, and like it's just a really good thing. Like I'm really proud of all the people in the community, and they've done such a bang up job. And they've all came on my stream. We all hang out for a while, and it was cool. Yeah, it was a good time. So shouts out to all of them. There's a whole bunch of them. Like I could go on. Imperial Trooper, Deadpool, of course. Deadpool's part of that too.
He recently joined our Facebook group.
Oh, well, congrats to him. That's awesome. I am 100% glad to see that. So thank you, everybody, for the love. We appreciate it. Thank you for listening. We always appreciate each and every one of you for listening every single week. So because we are talking about ancient Egypt tonight, it's time for an Egyptian dad joke.
It's time for dad jokes. I already know what level this is going to be because of the way that you're laughing about it. Because if you think it's that funny before you even said it, it's got to be horrible. So I'm preparing myself already. I'm good and prepared, so that way it won't hurt quite so much.
That's good. That's good. Where do pharaohs like to eat?
Ugh.
Pizza Tut.
You should feel ashamed. That's one of those situations where it's like, that was bad and you should feel bad.
Where do mummies go for a swim? I'm gonna give you two because I'm a benevolent leader.
A backup joke. Great.
I'm a benevolent leader. I asked you where did mummies go for a swim?
Yeah, I'm waiting for that gut punch.
The Dead Sea.
Yeah, I get it, and it makes me laugh, but I get it.
I thought it was fantastic.
At least that one you didn't have to like force a pun, because so many of these jokes are forced puns, and those are the worst. Like a pun on its own is isn't great, but a forced pun is even worse.
But we're here for the fun of it, right?
Oh, and Weekos. There's Weekos giving you another one. Thanks, buddy. Thanks.
How come no pyramids ever have daddies? They always only have mummies.
Fact check. They've never found a mummy in a pyramid. Guys.
It's even better because you're so hurt about it.
I am. Like, that hurts me on an archaeological level. Like...
That's because they were moved because of tomb raiders.
Yeah.
Now I'm back up in this.
Nah, I mean, Valley of the Kings, designed specifically for tombs, pyramids, not at all.
There we go. You know there was more than one pharaoh, right? You know there was more than
there's
one
other
pharaoh,
countries.
Right? This show has devolved. You thought that we would evolve into a smarter species on the show, but really we have just devolved.
That's our T-shirts, really. It should have like us. No, it should have that modern man at the beginning, and it goes down through like the apes, and then at the end it's us standing there after the apes there. Just us two hanging out there with a grill.
Couple drinks.
Yep. That's what happens when you go backwards.
That does happen, doesn't it? Happens quite frequently. So, yeah, there it is. Tonight, we are talking about people's love affair, or the world's love affair, I should say, with ancient Egypt. Oddly enough, people are so in love with ancient Egypt that you rarely hear about really any other ancient civilization, maybe Greece and Rome. But even then, they don't get the same amount of love that Egypt does. Now, sure, Greece and Rome have the political structure, and a lot of that is put into play in this day and age. But Egypt seems to have a much more broader influence on our day-to-day life. And people say, well, how can that be? Well, think of all the things that you see related to Egypt as opposed to things that you see related to things like Sumer or Mesopotamia or any other civilization. Now, you have to wonder, why are people so in love with it? Is it the beauty of the pyramids? Was it the pageantry of the pharaohs? Or is it even the mythology surrounding Egyptian life and death? Maybe it's just all of it. And the theories about Egypt themselves, too, are quite crazy. Some are very, very different, like ancient astronaut theory. Also, things like Akhenaten being an alien. and other such theories that have to do with just all of that, you know? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think there's a pretty good central reason, and I hope this doesn't like completely like end the show because it's a pretty good reason and be like, oh well, that's it, that explains it. See you later, bye folks. But it's part of the reason that I think, after thinking about this question in the last couple weeks since you brought it up as a show topic, is that it's accessible, for one thing, because unlike a lot of other civilizations, like you look at the Mesoamerican civilizations, you look at the other Mesopotamian civilizations, you look at a lot of these other ancient places in the world, and most of them all collapsed, and their people were scattered, and they can't tell us much about them. We have to find everything. We have to do so much digging to find out anything about them. Whereas Egypt has been continuously settled. Like, their population may have gone up and down, but the Egyptian people have never been wiped out as a people. Like, they're continuous. It's a continuous line of people. They've mixed with other cultures, and they've absorbed and done different things. But they're a continuous civilization, so it's like they have all this wealth of knowledge and all these things that they've been continuously able to tell us. I mean, yeah, we're still digging things up out there that we didn't know about. We're still finding mysteries like that sarcophagus we talked about last week with the fluid in it. And they still find this kind of stuff, but there's so much history that we know about ancient Egypt compared to all of the other civilizations. We're still digging in those other places. There's so much mystery about the other ones that we might never know because there's no one around to tell us. But here you have a continuous culture of people who preserved most of what they knew of their background and brought it forward with them. And I think that's a huge draw, honestly.
Yeah, I would have to say, too, even though you do have places like Japan, Iran, right, Peru, all these places, I think with the exception of Peru, because Peru, a lot of stuff in South America is harder to get to.
Yeah.
You got to cut through swaths of jungle just to get anywhere. But places like Japan have some serious history behind them, but nobody's ever running out to be like, man, I got to learn more about the ancient Japanese. No, it's like, here's the pharaohs. And I think what it could be, too, is the just sheer amount of buildings and other such monuments that we've never seen before in the ancient world. Yeah, there's been pyramids. There's been ziggurats, which are a type of pyramid. There are also step pyramids that they've had in different South American regions. So there is that. But the oddity of it all is the pyramids are a different animal altogether. And in the chat, Lee has shown up and she says, hello, penguin. So hello, penguin. And what we don't understand, I think, is the mystery of these pyramids. It's not so much the ideology of other places. I think it's that there's not these mysterious monuments that we have in other places like Japan or Iran. We have broken down stuff. You know what I mean? We have like things that were destroyed, but there's like a shell of it. In Egypt, the pyramid of Giza is still sitting right there. The Sphinx is still sitting right there.
And we know what happened to them, too. Like, we know why they're in the shape they are, because they have said, yeah, back in our history, as a people, we took off the limestone, we took off the gold, we basically stripped it for parts to build other structures. And so we know why they're in the state they are, compared to other cultures where we don't. Like, we don't know why some of the Mesoamerican cultures disappeared and why the jungle just took over their pyramids. In Iran and Iraq, there's so much fighting going on, and there's always something that we can't get to some of their things, and they're not as concerned about, unfortunately, preserving their culture, so we can't have access to that. Japan has been a homogenous culture for its entire existence, and up until after World War II, after that was over, we really didn't have access to that either. So even that's just more recent memory, whereas Egypt, we've had this direct access to it.
Right. And I think, too, with it being right in the middle of the city. Like, you're driving around Cairo, you're driving around any of these locations, and you look over, and boom, there's a pyramid, or boom, there's a Sphinx, or boom, there's this, or boom, there's that. And I think, too, the fact that Napoleon, when he ended up coming over, right, or when he went there to Egypt, he brought stuff back. He brought scholars back in 1798, 167 of them to be exact. Now, it would also include the future director of the Louvre Museum, but they also returned with antiquities that ended up in the British Museum. Things like obelisks, statues, and even the precious Rosetta Stone was all found. And like I said, Egypt isn't the oldest civilization. One of the oldest civilizations, Göbekli Tepe, is even older than that. But we don't have a lot on that. We don't know what's going on over there, so we don't know what to say. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have any idea of what's going on. So with this, we do. We have written records. We have, we had to crack the code with the Rosetta Stone, but it was just a bunch of things. You know what I mean?
It's accessibility. We were able to get at it. And because we know so much about it, we also know how much more there is to learn. Again, compared to other cultures, we don't know what we're missing from the other cultures because we don't know what was there originally, because we don't know what's been lost. Whereas with Egypt, their people have brought forth all these centuries of remembering, and so they know what they've lost as a culture, and they preserve everything in stories, and even if some of the details are fuzzy over the hundreds of thousands of years, they still take a point of pride in it. And you can go to people in Egypt, like you can go to a lot of relatively random people in Egypt, and they can think, oh yeah, let me tell you all about it, and they'll know a lot of good deal information about their history, compared to, like, you come to somebody here in Ohio and you ask them about the Serpent Mound, and they might be like, huh? Like, you have to look for specific people who know that, whereas there, it's part of their cultural heritage. They've known about it their whole lives.
Right. And you're right. And it's like when you grew up around it, like we grew up around some things. Not as ancient, mind you. Like the Great Serpent Mound, we don't even really know much about it because we don't even live in that area. We live farther up than we probably should. But we live further up, so we don't know about that. We know about the locks, though. But that's pales in comparison to just walking outside and like, oh, look, there's a pyramid. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's important. Ross says, I think a huge pull will be the basic instinct of curiosity. Ancient Egyptian history has been so well preserved in comparison to other histories, and the fact a lot of it is still viewable, if not tangible, that would be more interesting to people than picking up a book and reading about it. Humans are lazy in their learning a lot of the time, and if we have it spoon-fed to us, we show more interest in it. What do you think about that?
It makes sense, because that's the downside to it being so accessible. It's that because it's always there, everybody kind of feels like an expert without actually being there. Like, you can be like, oh, Egypt, yeah, I know about pyramids, and I know this, and I know about Pharaoh Khufu and Tutankhamen, yeah, mummies. And you feel like you know so much about it. And compared to other places, again, you don't, because you're like, oh, man, I don't know, there's so lack of information. And so with Egypt, it's kind of like you're given all this stuff, so it becomes, oh yeah, we should go someday. It's a tourist destination now. Let's go and let's see all this stuff that we've read about, but it's not to go there and study it. It's to go there and be like, hey, I've seen it. Look at this thing. This is great. I'm here at the pyramids. Take my picture. And people don't do that so much with the other cultures, again, because they don't know so much about it, because it hasn't been constantly like, look at all this we have about it. Look at everything we know about it.
Yeah, and you know, that's something that's very important too. And I take a quote from Jan Lodvik Grotiers from the Minneapolis Institute of Art's curator of African art, who orchestrated the Sunken City exhibition. He says, there's something about the mystery of it all that lures us back here to ancient Egypt again and again. Things are hidden in pyramids, in tombs, in sarcophagi. There are false doors, even hieroglyphs that require a code to understand them. He goes on to say that King Tutankhamun was buried inside 3 coffins nested inside each other. Those were hidden in a sarcophagus inside a frame inside 4 shrines. So that's something else, too, we have to consider, is the majesty of everything in Egypt, of all of the artifacts, of all of the different things that they have going on, and the symbols and the signs and the pyramids and the Sphinx and different areas. And it's not just located in one spot. A lot of times with some of our more ancient civilizations, it's located in pretty much one spot. But Egypt is vast, and there's different cities that have different places like Luxor and Karnak and all of these regions. So having all of that and being able to go to it, and, you know, albeit a lot of the Egyptian archaeological minister, I think that they, while you might not agree, well, some people might not agree, have done a better job of keeping things in line as opposed to other places that just let things run, you know, however, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're very, they're, as far as like a government outlook on artifacts and things, the Egyptian government is very serious about the preservation of what it views as its heritage. And as a positive, they're very good about trying to make sure that everything they find out there is kept as preserved as possible. That's why the pyramids aren't, I mean, they still suffer damage from sandstorms and things like that, whatever, but, you know, there's only so much you can do about that. But as far as everything else, they do their best to take care of things. They try to make sure other ruins are taken care of, Valley of the Kings, etc. On a negative side, they take that to such an extreme that they kind of are typecast in a particular view of what their history is and what they want it to be. And they don't really deviate from that at all. Like, there's been various other new discoveries over the years that have kind of challenged that kind of stuff. And they've been like, nah, nope, it's not like that. It's not like that at all. It's the way we told you about it, and that's it. And they're very kind of intractable about how the history is presented, and they don't really like any kind of challenge to it. They don't like having to change any of the official recorded history yet. And I get that. It's been their heritage for so long, and who knows, it might not really be any different. Maybe if they examined everything that, like, whatever new evidence comes out, it might not really be any different, and they might be like, see, we told you, you didn't even need to mess with it, it's still the same. But it's also kind of a fear, I think, that they have that something might be different, and it might make people look at them in a different light, and I think they're kind of afraid of that, and that's unfortunate. But beyond that, they're very good at making sure things are preserved. Very, very good at preserving records, preserving sites, and taking care of all that kind of stuff.
Nice, nice. Now, what we're going to get into next is Freemasonry in Egypt. Now, according to Halliwell manuscript, which is dated between 1390 and 1425, it states that the craft of masonry began with Greek mathematician Euclid in Egypt and would then head over into England. Philosopher Thomas Paine also traced Freemasonry to ancient Egypt. Occultist Cogliostro also claimed Egypt as the birthplace of Freemasonry. Now, the ancient and primitive rite of Memphis, Misraim, is a Masonic rite, and a Masonic rite is a series of progressive degrees that are conferred by various Masonic organizations or bodies which operate under the control of their own central authority. And this rite was known as Egyptian Freemasonry due to the invocation of Hermetic symbolism centered around ancient Egypt and its system of degrees. Now, the rite is especially known for its high degrees. It has 99 degrees, which is 3 times the amount of the 33-degreed rite of Scottish Freemasonry. And it was originally governed under a Grand Hierophant internationally from 1881 to 1923. Giuseppe Garibaldi was the first of these. John Yarker was another, and Theodore Roos would be its third and final leader. After that, the group would no longer have international leadership. One of the most important people that was involved with this Egyptian rite was noted occultist Aleister Crowley, who would sort of funnel into the what is it? You know this. what was his group?
The Order of Thelema.
Yeah, but there was a name for it. It was like a Latin term.
I think it was the AA.
No, the Order, like Templars. Man, you're killing me here.
Well, there's a few of them. He was connected to a few different organizations. That's all. I mean, the Templus Orientis, I think, was one of them.
The Ordi Templi Orientis was the one I was looking for. That's the one. Well, anyways, they brought that in to the fold, and he just ended up using it for his own personal gain, which you find a lot of, like, in occult studies. You'll find that a lot of that is pulled directly into that, and then once you start really studying it and understanding it, then you realize, like, sometimes they would just use different rites for their own benefits, and I don't think it hasn't had an international leadership since. There's some people who still practice it, but it's just one of those things that got kind of lost by the wayside. But yet again, the whole notion of Egyptian mysticism is prevalent in this structure.
There's a lot of legends about it, and it's hard to because this is one of those things that isn't part of the usual. Like, you don't go, when you go to Egypt and you ask them about the Freemasons, they don't really get into that as much. That's more of a Western kind of insinuation that's where it sprang from, which is really interesting. Although they do say that they had specially trained, like, it was almost like a guild of sorts of people who knew angles and masonry and things like that, and they were in charge of stuff, but we don't know just how deeply embedded that were. We assume, based on some of the people who were buried in certain fashions, that architects were held in high regard. We have a lot of assumptions about that, but that's one of those kind of in-between areas where I think we built more out of that than what it was. But again, it's just one of those mysteries that I don't think we're ever really going to solve.
I don't think so either. I think there's just certain things that will always remain left to the sands of time. I don't see, like the Sphinx, the idea of the Sphinx. I don't think that'll be something that we solve. Suppose there's different chambers that go into it, and that's where Osiris is buried in. I don't think anybody's found one yet, have they?
Well, that's a good example of what I was talking about the Egyptian government and the way that they look at some of their culture, because there's been a few different teams. They're not allowed to dig there. That's one of the big sticklers. The Egyptian antiquities folks say nope, no digging unless we've decided that you can dig there. And most of the time they say no digging at all because they don't want anything to get damaged, which is understandable to a point. But there's been some manuscripts that have made claims about under the Sphinx, and people have tried to verify it with ground-penetrating radar, and there were at least 2 teams in the last 10, 15 years that have said, supposedly, that they've seen via ground-penetrating radar that there are cavities beneath the Sphinx. However, a lot of this has been supposedly debunked by the Egyptian Antiquities Department, and they say, no, it's a false reading, it's this, we've got our own experts, and they say no, and they say your study is flawed, and everything like that, and because they don't agree, you can't go down and look. And I kind of feel like there is something. I don't know if there's some great mystery. Like, I don't know if there's an ancient machine. I don't know if there's something, like, really, truly mystical down there. But I think there probably is something. It could be even just basically a tool closet for where the workers kept things while they were building the structure up above. It could be something really simple. But the Antiquities Department, they're like, no, we don't want you looking down there. We don't want anything like checking out. And it kind of makes people start getting conspiracy-minded. They start thinking, oh, well, what are you trying to hide? What's down there? You know there's something down there. And there could be literally just, again, a broom closet. An ancient broom closet. And we wouldn't know. We won't know, and people are going to go over the top and make a bunch of claims about it. And I would love to know if it was just a broom closet myself. I would love to know what it is, even if it's just like something really not impressive. Because at least, oh yeah, that's cool that they would have that down there, because that shows that that's evidence that people built it. As opposed to the other theory where it says that extraterrestrial technology built the pyramids and built the Sphinx and built all the other kind of stuff. Because if there's just a tool closet down there, that's kind of more evidence that there wasn't really anything advanced going on. It's just that, oh yeah, we stored our stuff down here while we were building everything up. It adds a human element.
And that's, I think, important. Because what we see a lot of the time with Egypt is, I think, less of a human element. I think people are really stuck on the more mystic aspects, and you don't get that. I mean, you get so many theories, in finger quotes I'm doing this, so for those of you that can see it, theories regarding the pyramids, but you never truly get a solid theory. You know, you get, yeah, they rolled the blocks, or they had aliens build it, but I think on one hand, if you give it too much of a human aspect or a human trait, I think you lose some of that magic that people love so much about Egypt. And I think that's another thing, too, when it comes to different civilizations. They're not strangely built. There's some now. Granted, there's some. I will say there is a couple, like, I believe Pumpuku, I think. How do you say that?
Pumupuku? Maybe.
Is that it? We're both. Listen, we've been doing this show for this long, and we couldn't even remember how to say that. We should probably just hang.
We'll go back and watch an episode of Ancient Aliens and check on it, see how they say it. Because they're there like every other episode.
They literally are there every episode. Though.
That's one of Sukalos's favorite places. Like, he's always up there. If you watch the show, like the first couple seasons, he always talked about it all the time. And because it's got those straight cut, like, H blocks, which is really fascinating, and it grabs your attention because, like, oh man, look at all this stuff, and they know it, and that's why they have kept like airing it over and over and over again.
If you notice, they don't go to a lot of different Puma Punku, that's what it is. That's it. And like the first thing that came up for it was for Ancient Aliens, by the way. Mm. So we can all have a laugh at that. Yeah. And that is located at I'm trying to figure out where this is located. It should tell me.
It's in South America, isn't it?
It's somewhere. Oh, it's in Bolivia, Western Bolivia.
Yeah.
So Western Bolivia, but nobody really, like, once again, just because it has those blocks, and there's nothing else like it. With Egypt, you can trace the pyramids, you can trace the Sphinx, you can trace all of these things, right? But with this, you can't. And like you said, I think that's very, very interesting. But I think, like, adding that human element of, like, these were just people, I think it ruins the mysticism for everybody. What do you think?
Yeah, there's that too. I mean, on the one hand, it's nice to know that we, as a species, were capable of these great things, and that potentially we could do the same thing, even though we've never been able to reproduce the same skill on a lot of this stuff. So there's still something missing that we haven't seen. But again, yeah, there is something to be said about the mystery that it could be something else, that it could be the most popular theory, that it could be extraterrestrials, or in the case of some of the biblical ruins, that it could be basically an army of demons controlled by King Solomon, or it could be, all these different things that are not of this world, or that we aren't familiar with, that maybe we haven't seen, or like the jinn in the the City of Pillars.
That's my word.
So, like, all these places we can make all these interesting things about, whereas ancient Egypt, a lot of times a lot of people fall back on the extraterrestrial thing, but there's a big push to be like, no, people did this. And I get that. I get that on the one hand, you would almost rather have something else have done it just to say, wow, that's amazing, that's incredible. Whereas on the other hand, if it ever showed up and was like, hey, yeah, that's us, we built that, you'd be like, you wouldn't know what to do. So it's kind of like, you want the mystery, but you don't ever really want the mystery to be solved because you're not quite ready for that.
Because then you might be let down. Could it have been the Anunnaki that built it? Maybe. But then you come to find out it's some guy named Jim that just knew how to build pyramids. You're like, I was expecting the aliens to build this pyramid for me.
My name's Anu, and my last name is Naki. I don't know
Like,
how it got messed up in the books. I just, I signed my name. My name's Anu, and I'm from the Naki family.
yeah. So I have a rope in the back of my pyramid.
The problem is that these pyramid blocks are so heavy.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Pharaohs only. Yeah, and I think that's something we just fail to want, or I don't say fail. I'd say we just don't want to deal with that. We want it to be mysterious. And this next thing, the Dandera Light, which is a motif in the Hathor Temple in Dandera, Egypt, shows what appears to be a light bulb akin to that of a cathode ray tube. And in these motifs, Orthodox historians say that it is Harasmat. See, I was good. I pronounced this earlier, and I'm not going to get it. Harasmatus, which is Horus, in the form of a snake in an oval tube called that's HN, which supposedly represents the womb of Nut. Now, I don't know if you've seen this. You have seen this. I have seen this. They actually, I don't know if you know this though. They built an actual copy of what it would look like if it was a light bulb, and they say the serpent inside of it is the coil because the snake coils. So, there you go, connecting dots. That's a tough one. That is, and I also think, isn't there a hieroglyph with a helicopter supposedly, but it's not a helicopter?
Yeah, they said that was because of the way that it had been rubbed down over the years, and if you actually went back and looked at the original, it didn't resemble that at all. It just had been worn down to a point that when you looked at it, your mind could play the trick of, oh yeah, there's a helicopter, and there's this, and then... So I don't know. Without seeing it in person, I can't really say that for sure. But it sounds like something like that is one of those things that was actually kind of debunked, and but it keeps popping up, like other things. Like certain things keep popping up. Like, oh, look at this, it's the helicopter. Oh, look at this, it's the thing. And look at this. When you do a little bit of digging, and it's like, okay, there is a rational explanation for that.
Right.
But again, I mean. The light bulb thing, we talked a couple weeks ago about the Baghdad battery.
Yeah.
And so, something like the light bulb wouldn't really be too far out of that, in my mind.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that, 100%. And things like the Baghdad battery, I think, make things like the Dandera Light, more plausible, in my opinion. The next thing we're going to talk about now, this is something else. This is something else, and we've talked about this before. This isn't the first time we talked about it. But the Curse of Tutankhamen. Now, as we described above, King Tutankhamun's tomb was found in 1922 when Howard Carter and his men found the final resting place of King Tut. Some of the men in the expedition fell to odd circumstances. Sickness, one got bit by a mosquito and ended up killing him. But the main person in charge here, Howard Carter, did not succumb to the curse, and he lived to a ripe old age of 64. Given that he died in 1934 and the tomb was opened in 1922, that is a fantastic 12-year period that just went unnoticed. And the thing is, I don't necessarily believe in the curse itself. I think you could probably be I don't want to say brainwashed, but have the thought plan in your head like, oh my God, there's a curse. So you're like fretting about it enough to the point to where there's a name for it, but it's something where like you think about it so much it
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
The thing about that too is that in the past when they put these inscriptions on these locations where they talk about curses and things, they don't envision a future like ours. They don't envision like, oh, in the future they're going to have computers and cars and all this stuff. They assume, because why wouldn't you, that society as you know it is going to continue as you know it indefinitely. So if people of your society believe in curses and believe in this stuff, then putting a warning of a curse on a tomb is good protection, because people will always believe in it. They don't expect people to eventually have the internet and eventually have radio shows like ours and be like, oh yeah, there's not really a curse. That kind of stuff really doesn't happen. They assume that people will always be like, oh, there's a curse? Oh my goodness, I shouldn't raid that. Oh, you went with the raiding party there? Oh, you're cursed now. Stay away from me. You've got the curse. And that's how they assumed things were going to be. So a lot of that is, I just think it's a product of the past rather than something that really carries forward. I think there were warnings that were just designed to scare people at the time because people believed in it at the time. And they figured that was good enough to last into the future because they never expected things to change.
I think, too, when you open a tomb that's that old, you're going to get mold. And
Yeah.
somebody did die from that. You know, you're going to get those old diseases. You open up this fresh tomb that hasn't been opened in a very long time, and you're going to get it with all the mold spores and everything else in the air. And once that gets into your lungs, and they probably didn't have proper medicine like we do nowadays, it's over. And getting bit by a mosquito, malaria, there's so many things that could have happened. And they wrote it off to a curse, but I think it's just you went and opened this tomb. You didn't have any facial protection, so it got into your lungs, spores, mold, all that.
Yep.
And you die. You know, and I think it's funny that the whole, like, him not dying for 12 years after they opened the tomb made me think that either A, the curse doesn't exist, or King Tut is a very, very, very patient mummy. He waited it out and was like, I'm going to get you. But by then, you know, the guy was born, I think, in like 1874, 1884, and died in like 1939. So he was 64, I believe, 64, 65 when he died. So, you know, he lived a pretty good life in the 60s and in that time period. And you explored this tomb, and you probably breathed in the same spores and mold that your buddies breathed in, but you're still alive? I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's like a weird, sick joke on King Tut's part. You know, you get to watch everybody else die, but you're the only one that lives. I think somebody else lived a little bit longer, too. And we equate that, because that's been a lot of the pyramid lore, is if you go in, be careful. You know, we've all seen Indiana Jones movies where there's traps and pits and spikes. And I'm not saying those don't exist. Many times it was false walls, hidden chambers. But like you said, they've never found a pharaoh in these pyramids. So either A, they were moved because of tomb raiders, which is possible. We can't rule that out because we don't know, and moved to another location. Some of them now. Like, I believe the bent pyramid of Sneferu he might have been in it. We have the pyramid of Djoser. He might have been in it. So I think the smaller pyramids you might be able to make.
Well, some of those too, they think those were less actual. While they're pyramids as far as how they're made, they're like copycat pyramids. Like, they're pyramids made by people who made assumptions about the older pyramids and said, oh yeah, these are obviously tombs, so I want one for me because I'm royal. But they didn't know how to make it, which is why they're bent and which is why they look funny. And that's that's a theory that's been around for a little while. I don't remember where I heard it from, but it's you know, still in debate, but it does make kind of some sense that people afterwards may have lost the knowledge to build something like that, or they lost the knowledge as to why they were built. And they made the assumption that, oh yeah, they must have been tombs, and so I want a tomb like that. Let's build one. And then they didn't know what they were doing.
Well, the Pyramid of Djoser was constructed in 2630 to 2611, which predates the Pyramid of Giza. So what it could have been, too, instead of copycat, it could have been pre-pyramid. Like, this pyramid was just a design we wanted to test out to see if it would work. And it worked. Oh, there we go. And then Sneferu was another one. And there's a bunch of these smaller pyramids. Obviously, the Giza pyramid is a whole different animal, but they still, I don't think they've ever found any bodies. If they've ever found any bodies in there, they've been tomb robbers, I should say, not raiders.
Yeah, they've never found a pharaoh who was buried in a sarcophagus there. They've never found anybody of royal personage in any of the pyramids that are on the Giza Plateau or the associated areas there. The only places they've actually found people buried have been in the Valley of the Kings. And there's so many of them there that the assumption is that that was actually where they were meant to be buried all along. But again, it's hard to say. I mean, we don't really know. That's another one of those mysteries because, the common story is that they were supposed to use the pyramids as monuments to what they were in life, and yet they weren't found there. They've never been in those pyramids as far as we know. So
maybe we could go there and live in the pyramid. Well, a lot of times too, they say they were for energy. That's been a common theory because granite and gold are great conductors of electricity, and supposedly the water that ran underneath the pyramids themselves are able to pull the electricity and then send it out. However, all that works. But that was another assumption. And once again, people fell in love with that. You don't have that anywhere else in the world. You don't have people running off to Chichen Itza or Pumapunku. I don't think I said that right again. Whatever. To check that. You know what I mean? And I think that because Egypt is still there, obviously, and people still live there, it's easier to be like, wow, this could have been a thing. Because supposedly the Giza Pyramid was part of a energy grid that took energy all the way to Stonehenge and sort of traveled it around the world. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. We weren't there. We can only speculate, honestly. But I think that there is a little bit of weight there that holds, because if you don't find bodies there, what are you doing it for? Is it a giant shrine? Why'd you take 20, 30 years to build a giant shrine for somebody? It just seems... It doesn't seem logical to build a shrine like that. Now, listen. There have been some pretty amazing things built. We have the terracotta soldiers that were buried in China. And another thing, to bring China into this, they have pyramids too, but the government has actively been planting trees there so that they never get found. Why? Why is that the case? Why is the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities so revved up about not letting people in? I get you don't want people to come in and rob your places. I understand that. In both countries. You don't want people coming over here and robbing from us. Because, to be perfectly honest, Europe did steal a lot of Egyptian antiquities. It's just fact. Just a historical fact. So I get it. Maybe they don't want people coming in there pillaging. But why don't you have your own people doing it then? Going in there, checking this stuff out. And maybe they do. Maybe they do. And maybe they know the real reason the pyramids are there, but they just don't want to tell anybody because they don't want civilization to know. They don't want society to know. And I had a conversation with somebody earlier about something similar like this, like the different things that are out there technologically that we have no idea because it would fracture society. And I think this could be another one of those things. But once again, what if it's just some elaborate shrine? And they're just like, yeah, we built it for him because we like the guy. You really like the guy that much for 20 years? You built a pyramid? This dude must have been the best pharaoh that had ever lived, if that's the case. But it just seems weird to me that you build something so big and it does, well, to us, it does nothing. It just sits there. But I think there's a reason. At one time, there was a gold capstone on top of it. That's, obviously, that's the first thing people are going to start wanting to take. A giant gold capstone? Yes. It's mine. Hand it over. And the granite and the water underneath being conductors of electricity, something doesn't add up. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, there's certainly some things I think that could be said about all of these places that I think the rest of us aren't being told about. And again, a lot of it I think is less that it's some kind of earth-shattering extraterrestrial something or other. I think it's more, again, that it might be something that shows the history of Egypt in a slightly different light. And I think they are so proud of their history as they, or as we know it, and as they presented it, and as they knew it up to a point, that they can't stand the thought of that being threatened. And I think I think that's so much national pride that there's no breaking through it. There's no way for anybody to go in and be like, hey, but what about this? What if it has this great thing that could help the human race? We don't care. It's our history. Leave it alone. Don't touch it. It's ours. And I think that's a lot to do with it, unfortunately. And I think maybe there's things that either they find embarrassing about their past that they've discovered, or that just show maybe a heritage that they don't agree with. And so they're just trying to keep it as rosy as possible, which I understand to a point. I mean, it's their history and they want to be proud of it, but I don't know. Are we entitled to know the secret if it's not something that's actually going to change anything on a practical level? I mean, it's a really strange ethical question. Like, maybe we don't really need to know what the secret is, because maybe all it would do is change our perception of what the ancient Egyptians were, instead of actually some new breakthrough in medicine or in technology or anything.
I might be inclined to agree. If, and this is where I throw this in here, if every other place in the Middle East wasn't the exact same way. Nobody lets anybody in. Nobody.
And that's true.
That's the odd part. I'm sorry, but that's the weirdest part to me. Now, granted, I don't know.
But again, like, all of those societies, all of those civilizations are all some of the oldest on the planet, like Mesopotamia and Egypt and all these places, and Jerusalem, all that other kind of stuff. They've been around so long. I think part of that is ingrained in all of who they are. I think in their past, each one of them was threatened to a certain point with complete destruction of their culture. And some of them closer than others. Like the Jewish culture was almost completely eradicated multiple times. The culture of ancient Mesopotamia is being wiped out as we speak because of the extremists and things that are in power in a lot of the countries over there, which is really unfortunate. Like back when the big ISIS thing originally started to spread, they had those videos of them blowing up the monuments and all this other kind of stuff. And we still don't know what all the damages are. We don't know what's been lost because we don't know what they found. We weren't able to get in and check anything. Egypt is the only country where a lot of this stuff is still standing, but because they've been around through all of that same kind of situations, they know what could happen. And I feel like they're so afraid of losing some of their identity that they're just like, nope, we're going to stand the same way as everybody else over here, because if we open up, things could go bad, and we're not going to do it.
It's possible. And they're really one of the last remaining civilizations with a lot of their stuff still intact.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you might be 100% on the dot there. But it still doesn't make sense for other countries whose stuff isn't
right
as well preserved. Dome of the Rock, for instance. Suppose there's stuff under there, but nobody can go in. Now, understandably, that's a religious thing, so I get that. But it's just very odd. And, the pilgrimage to the Kaaba and all that, and it's just like, it's a lot in that region. Like, we don't have that anywhere else in the world. We don't have this quest to go all these different places. Nobody's running out to Chichen Itza except Sukalos and
or tourists to take pictures, and that's it.
Right. Pumapunku, nobody's running out there either, except Sukalos and Von Daniken. Again, Sukalos and Von Daniken. Nazca Lines, once again. It's not... I don't know. It's just very weird to me that people don't... I don't know. They don't go after other civilizations as much as they go after Egypt, and maybe that's because it's a city that's still or a country that's still intact, a civilization that still has its
accessibility,
its monuments. It's got to be it. Well, everyone, it is about that time to head on out of here. We have places to go and things to see, I guess. I don't know what we're gonna do. But anyways, guys, thank you for joining us for another episode of This Uncanny Earth, your weekly foray into all things uncanny, thank you, everyone, for all the love you show us. We 100% appreciate you. Thank you so much. We couldn't do this without you guys. Next week, we'll be recording episodes for Uncanny After Dark, a little bit of a spicier This Uncanny Earth. But that is only available to Patreon donors. So if you're not a Patreon donor, you are not going to be able to hear what we are going to talk about. It's going to be very spicy. So you're going to want to donate to that and get these episodes in your belly and digest them. And I don't know. I got nothing else from there. So anyways, guys, why be boring when you can be uncanny? We'll see you folks next week.